that, but let's move on, because this is a conversation we'll have later on our lifestyle segment, more on sexual harassment as well at the workplace, not just with what we're seeing with our members of parliament, but allegations, of course. The Chinese restaurant, The Nation breaks that story, the Nation newspaper, and now everyone has been talking about it. What did you make of it, Ms. Buka? And as far as it's broken, yes, Kenyans are not allowed, blacks are rather, Africans into the premises after 5 p.m. And it's been coverage since that day, even to yesterday. In fact, yesterday I remember watching part of the coverage, and NTV went now bigger, beyond the hotel, to issues on Chinese, their businesses, their investments in the country, some of what they've done. So went beyond this restaurant and what that meant.
I think when I first saw the story, I was asking myself, whether I've been to that restaurant, and I confirmed that it wasn't where I had been. But it raises, certain questions about, other nationals and the kind of businesses that they run within the country. I think it's unjust, to discriminate on the basis of race or or color or ethnicity. And what we have seen, as with the story of the Chinese restaurant, speaks of all that. That you're being discriminated on the basis of your color. That Africans cannot be trusted,
Security.
Insecurity, and I think at some point they even said we don't know whether they are terrorists, Al-Shabaab, and they go back to an experience where they had, we don't know how true that is, that they actually had Africans and they were robbed, and we have allowed them to operate businesses in Kenya. Takes us back to the dark days of colonialism, and what used to happen. It reminds me of South Africa and apartheid, of restaurants or places that could not be frequented, by Africans. I think it is completely unjust for that kind of discrimination to be happening in this day and age. And I appreciate the fact that the media brought it to bear, and talked about it. So that somebody, the bodies that license some of these businesses then would bring them to question and ensure that such forms of discrimination do not happen.
Do not happen. Claire, do you think this is a discussion that we, the media, can expand? Because it's been brought to the surface because of this particular restaurant. But let's face it, there are places we go and you can actually tell discrimination. For example, when you're walking into a building and maybe there is a white man in front of you, some of them are not frisked, they're not checked. But the minute you get there, you are checked. Is it something that maybe we've ignored for a long time until we are almost accepting it? Is there a way we can expand this debate so that in our own country, really, how can we be discriminated by our own as well, not just the Chinese?
Okay, personally, as they say in Islam, I cause. You cannot do that to me and I sit
and you remain silent.
Personally, I cause. Because usually, sometimes even when somebody jumps a queue and you've let that person, I always come to you and ask you, can all of us then come and stand in front of you? You see, because if this person came and stood in front of you. Back to this Chinese restaurant, actually, which the story was actually broken by a Standard reporter. Yes.
Was it first on
the Standard reporter is the guy who was actually, the Standard reporters are the guys who actually denied entry. And then
the guys who are confused as taxi drivers?
Yes. The ones that Mosoku is a guy who was denied. Yeah, then he, instead of writing it, he actually posted it. He wrote it on Facebook. Yeah, he went on Facebook. But actually, it so happens that this is not something that is new. Last year also, another reporter was denied access. And this is where I'm saying, like, I cause. And yesterday I saw a story by a very senior journalist in this country, actually, who wrote a small piece that he had been denied access, I think, sometimes last year. I think they went for, is it Tepanyaki or the one of tabletop cooking? Teriyaki table. The one is Chinese, one is Japanese. Yeah. what is happening is that right now what we're probably doing is we gave the Chinese so much leeway. I mean, some time back, everybody was going gaga about the Chinese. And there's so many things that we're not actually even talking about it. Not as much like the Chinese guys who are found running something, I think in Rwanda and stuff like that.
Which is what NTV did last night. They
but you see, these things,
there's the lady who was on Thika Road with a baby looking for the father.
Yes, there's so many other infractions, because this, I think for this, we also have to blame. We gave these guys so much. It's like China was coming here to deliver
the savior.
Yeah, to save us from everything. I mean, we had the so-called political analysts and all that. All these political analysts going, oh, we are looking east, we're doing this, and this is what China wants. I mean, it wants dominance. It will dominate if you guys. We keep on saying that the white man came, gave us the Bible, and while we're reading the Bible, they took away our land. This is exactly what these guys are doing now. So we still have to change our mindset. And I think this story needs to be told much more than that. We cannot just sit back and see these guys. Some years back, I think there was a story about a Chinese guy who was roasting maize somewhere. So I think 2 or 3 years back, there was another story where hawkers were complaining that Chinese were taking over their jobs. You see, so I think this is something that we have to ask, how did we get into this hole? Yeah, because right now we are actually probably trying to get out, and we are still digging ourselves in.
Because we've done stories on tribalism and the effects that has it being entrenched in our society and the repercussions of the same. Should we now have one on racism?
We should continue that conversation, and you know, it's not just the Chinese. You know, as he mentioned earlier, there are places where you walk into and it's very clear that you'll either be served last, if at all.
I remember the croissant story.
Oh yes,
the one that
leading coffee house.
Yes, you know, it happens. You patronize a place, and because you're an African, you're served last. The white person comes in, and they're given, you know, undivided
But I think also it's defeatist for us to keep on screaming about that and stuff like this. One more thing, like in this particular case, what we should actually be asking is, where are our law enforcement or the authorities? How could these guys, now we are seeing that they're operating without a license? How many other businesses? I mean, the Nairobi County government rushed to close it down. Where have they been all this time?
But could it be that there's a bigger picture here in that even
before we attack the Chinese, we should be asking our own waters.
Precisely.
Like, yes, where have you guys been, and how many other things are actually going on without licenses, unlicensed?
And could this be an issue that we have as Kenyans, that even our authorities, the minute they see a foreigner, they already assume everything is okay? The same way that watchman, when he sees a foreigner, different color skin, they allow them in. Is it a debate that we should be having, maybe to look at ourselves and ask ourselves the question, are we still colonized, you know, from within? Maybe from without we are not, but inside we are.
That is very true. I mean, like, okay, I think you're younger, but that's how Kenya lost. There was a guy who came here called Dick Bag, and before Golden Bag, there was a guy who came here called Dick Bag and Associates. He had a company called Dick Bag and Associates, and he actually conned the whole country. That was the 4th All Africa Games in 1987. I mean, he promised people he'll bring Janet Jackson, he'll bring Jermaine Jackson, and he was actually going to market the what do you call this thing? I mean, the 4th All Africa Games for the country and all that. And he ran away. He's never been traced. Nobody talks about it. You see, so just why did he do this? Just because he's white.
Yeah. All right.
So this is something that actually is, we need to go back and ask ourselves, like, it is us. It is actually not them, because we let them do all this.
They have found
so much so that actually, when we are so dark, we become white.
Ms. Booker, and going back to the question of even institutions, because it is one thing when the media exposes something, then see the authorities coming, we see the Nairobi County government coming in, no license, so the arrests that have been made. We've seen when building collapsed, you know, they'll say, the owner, we're going to take all of this action. But this just goes to show the inefficiencies, the concerns, and how systems are not working. Should we also be putting more of a spotlight on this? Because that's laziness. It cannot be the media that is doing the work for them, then they now come and say, yes, we are fighting this very hard. We are giving a notice. No stone will be left unturned. It shows the glaring issues there as well, doesn't it?
It does in a big way. And you know, it's interesting that most of these institutions are very, you know, they react to situations. They don't seem to even know that some of these problems exist until they're highlighted, and the response is always, you know, very reactive kind of response.
Yeah.
Once they have done that, nobody goes back to ask some of the questions that Clay is asking. You know, how are these businesses even allowed to operate without a license?
Yeah.
And are there others? You know, they could have closed this one, but nobody goes back to ask, is there somebody else out there who could also be operating without a license? And so you find that their response oftentimes is, you know, dealing with one problem and not looking at the bigger picture. Nobody does that. Nobody spends time, you know, to investigate. And until the media brings it out, you know, nobody will talk about it. If this story is not sustained in media, you know, that conversation will not be sustained. It dies a natural death, and tomorrow we wake up and we're talking about something else.
So we need to carry it on despite the fact that the restaurant is closed, and you know, if that happens and they leave, then we need to carry on and find out, is there more? And I think we also have a huge responsibility, even as Kenyans, from our leaders to all of us, to just like Clay mentioned, that if this happens, then even wherever I am, I should not take it. I should not, you know, accept it.
Yeah, I think the conversation should continue. And you know, this particular episode should raise certain fundamental questions that would then warrant a lot more investigation, a lot more coverage. The issue of, you know, the Chinese invasion, for lack of a better way of saying it, you know, when did the rain start beating us? You know, what did we do? Why were we so receptive to having them, you know, come in? And what has this meant, you know, for local businesses, for example? You know, how about others who might not be operating with license, and not just the Chinese, you know, but other, you know, foreign investors within, you know, within the country? I think it's one case, but that case should be used to highlight and investigate, you know, similar situations across the country.